Hello again. Now, Africa is under the spotlight today at the IMF and World Bank spring meetings in Washington in the United States. South Africa's energy crisis and its inability thus far to solve it has been mentioned as one of the biggest factors hampering our economic growth. Our reporter, fellow anchor here at eNCA, Heidi Giokos, is in Washington attending those meetings. She's joining us now just to give us an update. Good afternoon, Heidi, South African time. Now, I mean, there's a lot of this sentiment that is not really positive about Africa at the IMF and the World Bank and South Africa as well. Our economic growth is not performing well at all.
Yes, certainly. And just for the whole African continent, there's great concern that a lot of countries on the continent are not going to see significant growth. And there are a number of reasons for this. A lot of countries have been, of course, affected by the Russia-Ukraine conflict. You have high inflation, you have interest rate hikes that are really affecting people on the ground. And South Africa specifically, we do know that the growth rate for 2023 has been revised down to 0.1%, which basically means, Bradan, that there is very little to basically no growth for South Africa predicted by the International Monetary Fund for 2023. The main reason for this is the energy crisis, and being here and asking those questions to the relevant leaders here about what is contributing to this very low growth and asking the questions, has this got to do with our energy crisis? Everybody said and has answered that it's mainly got to do with solving the unreliable and inconsistent electricity supply. How does the economy grow when there is very little electricity and consistent electricity supply? You cannot create jobs, businesses cannot grow, factories come to a standstill when you constantly have interrupted electricity supply. But we must also speak about the impact that the Russia-Ukraine conflict has had, and also interest rate hikes. This is, of course, going to be a big one. And it's not just for sub-Saharan Africa, which was focused on today, but it's an issue around the globe. The big question is the continent going to move into a recession? Are we going to see times like the Great Depression? Because we have not seen such low growth predicted for the world, not just the world economy, not just sub-Saharan Africa. We haven't seen such low growth predictions in the last 30 years. So it's a very worrying picture. Having asked these questions about what does this actually mean moving into the next 5 years or so, they are predicting that next year we will see some stability in terms of growth, but it's about bringing that inflation down, especially for countries on the African continent where we do know there's a risk of food insecurity as well. So there are many issues at play, there are many conversations at hand, but the big concern is for South Africa as it's that 0.1% growth prediction for this year.
I understand our finance minister is in Washington, and you might try to get hold of him a little bit later. It seems, though, that the thinking in the government sectors is that the electricity situation is being brought under control.
Yes, I actually bumped into Finance Minister Enoch yesterday, and we will be trying to engage with him today. And I asked him just off the cuff what his assessment is, given the fact that the IMF is predicting 0.1% growth for 2023 for South Africa, which is basically no growth. And the minister saying, well, we're going to bring the electricity crisis under control. This is, of course, why the president announced the electricity minister appointment. You have the electricity minister specifically focusing on trying to bring an end to the rolling blackouts. But if I'm not mistaken, Bradan, South Africa is currently going through stage 6 rolling blackouts, which is of great concern because the electricity minister had indicated some time ago that there could possibly be a 10,000 megawatt shortage for the winter ahead. There's obviously going to be an increased demand. How are they going to bring this electricity situation under control? But not only that, what's going to be imperative here is how do you deal with a situation where the South African government has decided to take over 200 billion rand of Eskom debt. That relief package, what is that going to entail? How is that going to work out? You have municipal debt. The IMF today in its Sub-Saharan Africa report saying it is imperative for South Africa to sort out its electricity crisis, because if it's not sorted out, you will not see any sort of significant growth. Let's listen to that.
So, on the growth projection, I mean, it's largely being influenced, of course, by the electricity production difficulties that the country is having. So I think that's by far the most important influence in the projections that we have. Of course, the external environment being difficult is a factor also. I think 0.1 is the number we have. We think other things being equal, probably the country will scrape through with a small expansion, but honestly, I mean, there's a big confidence interval around that.
Okay, Heidi, so what's next at this? I mean, you've mentioned a number of issues, and I was just thinking, the world is so volatile. Besides the Ukraine-Russia conflict, which has caused all sorts of challenges, there's tensions brewing elsewhere. Just the other day, China was doing military exercises around Taiwan.
Yes, certainly. I think the world is in a panic at the moment. The sentiment that I'm getting here on the ground is that the IMF and the World Bank are watching this and monitoring this very closely to see what happens. You have huge economies like China that are also not going to be contributing significantly to the growth prospects. And everybody is feeling the pinch in some form or another. The conversations and the terms that we're constantly hearing is bringing inflation down, stabilizing interest rates, the financial squeeze that most African countries are going to be experiencing. If you look at what's happening in Ethiopia, you have a humanitarian crisis here. You had people actually protesting outside the International Monetary Fund about 2 days ago saying, what is going to happen? You have African countries saying, how much more funding can we actually get from the IMF? There are austerity measures that many countries have to undergo to try and stabilize their economies. And of course, coming all the way from South Africa, it's going to be crucial to get perspective as to how to handle this energy crisis. Something needs to give and something needs to be done, because that is our biggest downfall as an economy. How do you stabilize our economy, create those much needed jobs? When you don't have constant electricity supply, how do you bring in that investment? So there is a lot of panic, and we just hope there's not going to be a global recession. I was speaking to Rapiwa the other day, and she was saying it's almost like the times again of the Great Depression, and we just hope that doesn't happen. But the IMF is, trying to provide some kind of positive outlook to say things are going to stabilize if economies stick to the path that they need to be on to bring in that economic growth.
Yeah, but the IMF and the World Bank are those who are blamed by the developing world for very expensive loans with high interest loans that they've given to them. It's going to be interesting what the way forward will be like. Heidi, thank you very much for the update there. That's Heidi Giokos in Washington, D.C., attending the IMF and World Bank spring meetings.